as we are together right now, right here, let's just keep our baggage down, whatever we came with to this meeting, whatever is going on in my mind, in my body, whatever emotions are playing primarily right now, including if I'm feeling rested and peaceful. So, not just the negative baggage, but any positive or pleasant baggage also. So, let's just leave it all as it is. And as this resonates, and maybe this even happens, that everything is just let be, what lets it be? What did I point this to just let the content, the baggage be? What is it that drops the baggage from its shoulders, quote unquote? What is that? Is it baggage itself? Or does it have a different quality or a different nature from the baggage? How do we know what's baggage and what is the dropper of the baggage? And this question really points to, is there a dropper of this baggage? Can the dropper be found, be located? Give it a try. Just look around. Maybe it's hiding. Maybe it's right there. Did you find a dropper? And if we did find a dropper, can that be dropped? And then what drops that? And as everything that can be dropped is dropped, what remains? Just right here in your immediate experience, in your immediate perception. We don't have to do any gymnastics or form any answers or concepts to even address this question. What remains? This question really is to point attention to that which remains, and then just being that, and recognizing that there is no need to be that because there is that only. Maybe it becomes possible to relax into it, to release into it, and then really recognizing that there is nothing else to be relaxing or releasing into it. There is just it. And even all the baggage that was just dropped to recognize it is also within it. Does it need anything? Does it want anything specific? Does it resist anything? Is there anything missing in it that it can go out and look for? Is there an outside of it? Is there anything else to it? Or is there other for it that it can point to and say, that's not me or that's not it? What can it be called? The whole system of language and the concepts that is how this, whatever this is understood. Can any of those concepts or words in language be formed in a way to describe what it is? It just is. It can never not be is. So it can never be reported as it is not, because it has to be there to report it is not. Because even that report takes place within it. Are there any conditions to this, to it? Is it more it self in certain quality of content and less itself in another quality of content or baggage? That's the word we've been using today for content. Can it go anywhere? Can it leave? For it to leave, there has to be an outside of it. And is there anything else where it can step out towards and leave and not be present anymore? And who would or what would register that? This, that is, to which there is no other, to which there is no boundary, to which there is no outside of, within which everything is allowed, everything is included. The whole spectrum of duality is within this. And this itself doesn't have an opposite. There is no other to this. This itself morphs into the spectrum of duality, the good and evil, pleasure and pain, peace and suffering, joy and sadness, hot and cold, me and the other, here and there, health and disease, wealthy, unwealthy, wisdom, ignorance, all the opposites are within it. It itself has no other. There is no opposite to it. So this or it is what you, what I, what we are truly, really, actually, within which the storyline, the humanness, the body mind mechanismness of you, of me, of everybody that appears to be, plays out. to recognize yourself as this, as it. There may be a movement to detach or to negate or let go of the personalness or the person that I have been living as for so long. And all I knew was that I'm this person and I'm living with all these persons and going up and down in life with the flow of life. For this to be recognized, a movement may seem to happen where the flow of life starts to become dry. It doesn't feed the deeper sense of desire anymore, even. So the desires might be there, and the desires might even get fulfilled by the world or by the initiatives and all the efforts that I might have put in the world for money, for relationships, for knowledge, for respect, for service, even for spirituality. And at a point, even if results are achieved, whatever results were promised from those endeavors, it starts to feel dry. It's like, no, that is not what I was looking for. I've gotten it. And now that I've gotten it, I can say it doesn't make me feel the way I thought it should when I started working towards it. And that is the turning point. That is the catalyst to detachment, to understanding, and sometimes very painfully understanding that it's not out there. Whatever I may do, however good I may become, however wealthy I may become, however liked and approved and looked up to I may become, however spiritually mature or a good meditator or a long meditator I may become, it still doesn't satisfy. It still doesn't give me that sense of, oh, it's done. I'm good. I am where I want it to be. So where do I want to be? I am. I am where I want to be. That is the place I want to be, where I can just simply let go of the striving, of the effort, of the endeavor, and just be I am. I already am. There is nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, no endeavors for me to prove, for me to become good enough to accept for myself that I am. I already am. Throughout all these desires, the efforts to fulfill those desires, and through the disappointment that may come after the desires are fulfilled and they just don't fit the narrative of what was expected out of them. Or I also am through the frustration or the defeat that might be felt when the desires are not fulfilled. I still am. And this I am is the light of it, or this, the word that we have been using to label that you are already. That is already. So I already am within it. And this I am gets plugged into or gets identified with the sense of personal conceptual self that needs to achieve or needs to let go or needs to just feel worthy of I am, forgetting so innocently that it already is. And that is why the person, when becomes disillusioned from its own endeavors and its own agendas, the question that find your source and finding God, union with God, these concepts and these modalities really resonate to the person at that point because it doesn't know where to go anymore, because it's not found out there. So I might as well pray now. Pray not for those endeavors and the fulfillment of those endeavors anymore, because it seemed to not be out there. Now the prayer really is for the one to whom the prayer is addressed to, which is this that is already all there is. And just the happening where I, as the person, finds myself, we can call it rock bottom or at a dead end where I have no other choice but just to surrender and ask for peace or just this satisfaction that I was looking for out there. Now, basically, just understanding that I really don't want to ask for money or relationships or love or approval. I just want contentment. I just want to be at ease. I want to stop running. That already is grace. That already is the grace that you are penetrating the content, the person, the conceptual self that you are. So when I, the person, am longing for this, it already is the grace of this for me, the person, to seek that I am, to seek the source of the person that I am. And that is what we can call turning inward. Just turning the attention to me, the person, and then just kind of choicelessly looking into, well, where do I come from? Where does Gurleen come from? Where does all her likes, dislikes, preferences, motivations, sufferings, drives, everything, all her tendencies come from? And that already is the movement of letting the baggage be. So the flow of life out there is not interesting anymore. Who said what and what's going on? And now the attention is already within my own mechanisms as the person. And then there may come a point when it's seen that even there's no answer to this. Like, where do I come from? And to really know the answer to that, the question and the questioner has to be dropped. And that may be a result of another disillusionment, of getting tired of looking for the answer, and then really seeing that that just became another endeavor, like the endeavors of the world out there. And even the inner endeavor of trying to find out who I am and really mechanically or mentally or intellectually trying to find it just doesn't work. It's just more content behind which the answer really lies. And the answer cannot be found because the one who can find the answer has to be dropped for the answerless answer to shine on itself, not on the person. And then the person may come back and can relate to that memory of that happening and then can own it and cling to it or surrender to it, whatever may happen from there again. But it is not the person's recognition. The recognition dawns on itself. The awareness becomes aware of itself. And then the conceptual self may come back, evidently does come back. And then it may either surrender to the awareness or cling to it or want to dive deeper into it. And then then an endeavor starts with that recognition being the object of desire now. And it's definitely a healthier object of desire than other objects that we used to desire before. But to recognize that it is still being treated as the object of desire, which means I primarily identify as the person, and awareness is not what I am. Awareness, that's why it's the object of desire. That's why I want to stabilize in it. So there is still an I and an it. But when it dawns on itself, it is known that it is what I am. And the person that I take myself to be is within it that I am. And all throughout this discussion, where was it? Did it leave? Did it become absent? Did it move even? So whether speaking is happening or listening is happening or me being the person is happening, it is within which all of that happens. So just when it registers that something is happening, it is proof enough that it is here. Otherwise, nothing could happen. And that is what we can maybe even label faith. Faith is not belief. Faith is end of doubt. Faith is the absence of doubt. When doubtlessly it is known that it is here always, beyond the concept of time. So was, is, will doesn't apply here. It is. That's faith. That's faith for the person, because it knows that because it is, whether that field of isness is experientially available to the person or not, but just knowing that because the person is, whether it is suffering right now or whether it is in peace right now, whether it is seeking or whether it is relaxed and content. But just because the person is here means it is within which the person is here. And that faith facilitates surrender. Surrender to whatever I, the person, may be experiencing in this moment. Surrender to the presence of peace. Surrender to the presence of suffering. The word surrender can also be replaced with acceptance, unconditional, total acceptance of what is in this moment, even within the content. This sense of acceptance or the sense of surrender towards myself as the person, towards whatever I am experiencing as this person, can become the baseline. This acceptance can be the baseline of how the person lives now, how life is experienced now. And from this baseline, when the experience is painful, when the experience is beyond what the person can tolerate in terms of pain, the initiatives can still happen to mitigate that pain, to release that pain, to relieve that pain, to manage that pain. And from that baseline, the suffering can be looked into ever more so effectively, because now I, the person, am not taking ownership of the suffering, because I, the person, now has faith, has access to that knowing within my system that me, my interpretation of the content, and the content are all in the impersonal arising within this that I am already. So now I, the person, can impersonally be interested in the suffering, not as mine, not as something that has to leave or has to stay even, but just impersonally, unbiasedly, neutrally, equanimously can look at the suffering, if that's what is to happen, or surrender to the suffering, or feel the suffering, witness the suffering, whatever movement is natural in a given moment will happen. And the baseline of surrender or acceptance, even living life as a person, smoothens the flow in a way that it is inevitable for the suffering to fall away. Because the suffering, the tendency to get attached or resist the flow of life, the content of experience, is already replaced by this baseline of surrender or acceptance now. So that is already half of the suffering gone. So why not that the whole suffering may fall away at a point? Even with the presence of suffering, if there is a baseline of this total surrender in a way that I, the person, am not responsible for this suffering, it is here. It is here to do what it is doing. It definitely is not pleasurable. It's definitely not comfortable. But it's less uncomfortable now because I, the person, am not trying to get rid of it attitudinally, internally. I may still find myself dancing or doing a sitting breathing meditation or talking to someone or sleeping it off, whatever way seems helpful to relieve or to feel into whatever is arising as the suffering. All those actions may still happen fruitfully or not so fruitfully. But that inherent sense of, oh, why is this here? This doesn't, I want to get rid of it. That attitude is absent. And that's already a layer of suffering gone. Even in the noise of unpleasant arisings or suffering, the person can be quiet. And that is already the penetration of this, that you are within the system, within the storyline, within the person. The quietness has been introduced in the system, and that is the antidote to the noise of suffering. Just as the person with faith, with that baseline of surrender, um, knew not to take ownership over the suffering, over the noise, also knows that even this quietness is not to be owned. It is also just here, just like the noise. There is no point in clinging to this quietness. There is no point in being proud of this quietness. That would be actually very fatal for the system if that happens. But if it happens, then there is no one taking ownership of that either, because it's all impersonally going on within the content of experience that is playing within this that you are. None of it is who you really are. And all of it is you. That's the paradox in the words. But in the recognition, it is clear that that's exactly how it is. Anyone wants to share anything or say anything, please feel free to raise your electronic hand and I can unmute you. Ranko. Hi, how are you?
Very nice. You?
Good, good. Thank you.
Today you really give me a lot of material to think about. Thanks for that.
You're very welcome.
But my kind of main question at this point is how to distinguish between doership and non-doership in everyday life. So for me, doership is a belief that I'm doing something or not doing something. And also the other person is doing something or not doing something. And whatever I perceive, sense, think, that is my doing. And this belief with its consequent meanings and thoughts create my perspective of life, my personal story. But real non-doing is recognition that everything is just is. And doing is just interpretation of this basic sense of being, basic sense of I am, as something that is being done. And the real non-doing comes from this state of silence, that how I experientially feel it. So in my life, there are kind of two phases, doership and non-doership, and trying to distinguish them in my everyday life. And I see that when I'm coming from doership, it is very heavy feeling. There will be lots of suffering. Basically, there's some sort of heaviness, like mental constriction in this. So non-doership creates a flow and contentment in life. I feel like more content and just flowing, and with no concrete reason, with no purpose, no needing for purpose, and it is just happening. So my question is basically, maybe you can expand a little bit how to recognize doership or non-doership, tips and tricks, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. That is a very mature observation of life, what you just put forward. And yeah, I'm very happy with what you have brought forward for discussion today. So this will probably lead to going into some things right now. So please forgive me if I take a long time to answer this.
Please do.
So before we even get into what you asked, just for anybody who's not familiar with the concepts of doership and non-doership, I may just expand a little bit on that, just so everybody knows what we are talking about. So according to the concept of my teacher, Roger Castillo, enlightenment, or what we are really looking for, is peace of mind in daily living. And what is peace of mind in daily living, or what is enlightenment, is just falling away of suffering or end of suffering. That would lead to the question, what is suffering? So what is it that falls away for peace of mind to prevail? And suffering in his teaching and his teacher's teaching is described as the belief in, or the attitude of personal doership, that I am the doer, the other is the doer, and all of this is going on to me, for me, about me, and I have to win in life. So that taking life personally and taking myself and the other to be the doer of life, of whatever happens. And the other belief that also is the root cause of suffering is that my happiness, my completeness, and what I'm really looking for is to be found in the flow of life, or in outcomes, or how life turns out, or how I'm perceived, what others think of me, whatever that outcome is taken to be in a particular system. So the attitude of personal doership and attachment to outcome is really what suffering is, practically speaking. And falling away of this attitude, and it's not when we use the word non-doership, it is just to label the absence of sense of personal doership. It is not a presence of a new attitude where I don't feel like the doer. It's just the absence of that previous contraction or belief that I am doing this, this good outcome happened because of me, this bad outcome came because of me, or the other. So that belief and interpretation of life just falls away. And that is what we call non-doership, or end of suffering in a way. So the question was, how do we know if we're coming from non-doership or doership in daily life? And that is a very valid question. And to address this, I will go a little more deeper into the concept of doership and attachment to outcome. So there are 5 kinds of sufferings that Roger points out to within this umbrella of sense of personal doership and attachment to outcome. So first is guilt and shame, which really means that I am the doer and something happened in life, an outcome came which was not pleasant to me. So which means it was an attack on who I am or what I want from life. So who created that attack for myself? Me. So now I feel guilty, and that results in the feeling of shame. The second part is blame and hatred. And it's the same principle of guilt and shame, but projected outwardly to the other. So when the outcome was delivered by the other and it caused pain, and pain taken to be an attack on who I am because I'm attached to the flow of life for my completion. So then the other is blamed and there's hatred for the other because they are the doer, they did it. And the third that type of suffering that falls into the sense of personal doership, the belief in the sense of personal doership, is pride or arrogance, where I am the doer. The outcome that I brought about in life was good, was pleasant, and now I feel proud or arrogant about it. And I want you or the other to praise me or to boast my ego now because I'm delivering such good outcomes as the doer. The next two forms of suffering are more related to attachment to outcome, the belief that life has to turn out a certain way for me to not be suffering, really, for me to be okay. The first is worry and anxiety. So really hoping in a way, or that life may be better in future. And then because of attachment, and then the counter to that is, what if life is not good in the future? So what if this happens? What if that happens? And really, the extreme form of worry can become anxiety. And recognizing that this is a form of suffering that comes from the deep-rooted belief that life has to be a certain way. Otherwise, I die or I am not. And the fifth kind of, or the second kind of suffering within the attachment of outcome umbrella is expectation and attachment to outcome is what Roger calls it. So expecting life to be a certain way, and not just negatively or positively, but just this incessant thinking that goes on, not in the form of planning, because planning is practical and is needed, but really that incessant tape that goes on that, oh, I wish our conversation goes well, or I wish that happens, I wish that happens. And it's almost unconscious even. And attachment to outcome, again, when the expectation is not fulfilled, there is this sense of, how could this happen? Like as if I have been robbed of my existence. So that is the form of suffering that can be labeled as attachment to outcome. So how do we know whether we're coming from doership or non-doership in daily life? In everyday life, I do feel like I'm the doer. So I do feel like speaking is happening as Gurleen right now. The hands are moving. So in the witnessing state, when I am resting as that which I am, within which Gurleen is appearing, this can be seen to be happening and not Gurleen's doing. But when Gurleen is Gurleen in everyday life, and that is in the background or maybe not even accessible at a point while having a conversation with someone or anything that's crossing the road full of traffic, whatever might be the event. To know, as you correctly mentioned, Ranko, that it is a sense of heaviness or lightness. So what you called heaviness and lightness is really suffering or no suffering. So when something triggers or leads to guilt, blame, pride, worry, expectation and attachment to outcome. So if any of those are a part of my internal scenario as something I do or something that other does, if those narratives or those suffering mechanisms is how it is interpreted, which can be simultaneous even, means it's coming from doership, because I'm still going to feel like I'm doing it. And other probably doesn't even know that this concept. So they definitely are going to feel like doing it, that they're doing it. And then they're going to own the fact that they are the doer. We may have come across the concept that I'm not the doer and the other is not the doer. But in the everyday transaction, that's not how it goes. So really the proof or the distinction between coming from doership or not is those 5 meters. So if any of those meters show up in an action or a reaction or some stimulus from outside from the other, if any of those 5 show up, and if it can be registered, oh, here is blame. So that means that the other was taken as the doer. So that's really a way to know if I'm coming from doership or not. If the understanding of coming from a place of owner of the experience, really, or attachment to the experience or resistance to the experience, then one of those 5 forms, or maybe actually many of those 5, 3 out of those 5 or 5 out of 5 will be present, have to be present. So yeah, like simply that would be a way to know. However, what you pointed is very, very accurate, that coming from doership feels like a whole sense of responsibility, because the outcome has to be just right. Thinking that, oh, I'm doing it, I'm the doer, and the outcome has to be preferable to the other or to myself for me to be okay. So that attitude in itself feels heavy or restricted or, tight, as you mentioned. So that is another way of just roughly noticing the motivation from where the action or the reaction is coming from, even before it has happened. And the 5 forms of suffering may appear after the fact when the action happens, if they're not already present in the system. So when there is non-doership and non-attachment to outcome, I still feel like I'm saying something, or I still feel like I'm ordering something or doing something, but it's coming from a place of not needing for it to go as I have already, planned of how it should go according to an expectation. However, having said that, that doesn't mean that I don't have an expectation. And let's not use that word here because it is labeled to be a form of suffering. So yes, let's just use Roger's word. So it doesn't mean that I don't have a preference of how it should go. So there might still be an inclination to, yes, if I'm ordering Chinese, I should be delivered Chinese or vegetarian. What comes to my table is vegetarian. There's still a preference towards that. So, but when that non-vegetarian, let's say mistakenly, is delivered on my table, especially when I ordered vegetarian, and there might still be a request or even an uncomfortable conversation going on with the manager of the restaurant or the server. But it's not coming from a place of, well, you insulted me, or it's not coming from a place of blame or being attacked, feeling attacked by life. It just comes from a place of, well, that happened. And that baseline of acceptance and surrender that we just talked about is just there. And from there, the even the painful action or reaction can take place to take care of something that might not be up to our standards.
Yeah. I even created for myself some sort of a practice. So I'm having a noting here, not doing, it says not doing. And
Okay, I see it now.
and
Yeah.
when I'm doing something, and then I ask myself, is it coming from place of doership, and maybe not.
Yeah.
And let's say a simple example. This morning I have to clean my apartment, and there was resistance to it. Oh, it's boring. I'm doing it all the way. And oh, I see, this is doership. This is doership. And what now? And I said, I just start. I do it for 1,000 times. I will just start doing it, and it is mechanically happening. This all mechanically will happen, and there is no any engagement, any mental engagement in me needed for it to be done.
Yeah.
And it was just flowing effortlessly. So
Yeah.
I guess in a way that is a secret.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And maybe just put a little music on while cleaning and then just dancing away while cleaning
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe it's not even as painful as the resistance was making it to be. Yeah. Yeah. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. It can be applied in any other situation like work and
That's right. Um, it's interesting how you said that there's resistance to something, and that somehow is known that it's coming from a place of attachment or doership, or you know. However, there's something that I thought of when you were saying that. Let me see if it comes back to me. Yes, so there is doership. When it is seen that there is doership, understanding that there is no doer to that doership. So even that doership is impersonal. I am not doing the doership, because that will be more doership on top of doership. Just like we were talking about suffering on top of suffering. So resisting suffering or clinging to suffering or clinging to the end of suffering is more suffering on top of the existing suffering. So yeah, there is doership. And then is it possible to take it from a place of non-doership? So like, for example, using your example, even if you decided not to clean, so you saw there's resistance and you just go back to sleep and it's like, I'll think about it tomorrow or whatever. And even if that were to happen, maybe that was what came from non-doership. But in other moments, you would just stand up and do it. So non-doership doesn't look like a certain action or a certain reaction to whatever is here. Non-doership is really just non-ownership of what is here. And then from that non-ownership that it is here, it's not, and I am also here as I am. So whether I stick to resisting the cleaning or whether I overcome the resistance or whether I just goes like, whatever, I'm just going out for lunch. So whatever ends up happening, non-doership is really being in a place of non-attachment to what is here as the content or the arising and what I do as a reaction or as a response to that which is here. So yeah, but wonderful. Not my doing. I'll stick it here on my laptop too and see how it goes.
and like we are all coming back to this freedom from the content of experience,
Yes,
basically.
yes, absolutely. And this is not my doing. Is such a wonderful mantra even for the personal expression that I am. And the impersonal existence that I am, it is already known that it's nobody's doing. Well, doing is not what's going on. It's really just, well, who knows what's going on, but it's not a doing. Uh, but as the personal expression, it is a beautiful practice to, to have that faith to be cultivated as that baseline that it's not my doing, not the other's doing. It's an impersonal happening, however pleasurable or painful peaceful or full of suffering it may be experienced to be. Yeah.
It helps.
Thank you, Rang. Thank you for that. Seems like we're at the end of it. Thank you so much for dropping by today, everybody. I love you. Thank you so much. See you next Sunday.